the calm before conviction. She sat in the courtroom as if she owned it, calm, composed, and smiling. Cameras captured every subtle movement, steady eye contact with jurors, quiet laughter with her attorneys, gestures that betrayed confidence rather than fear. It was almost impossible to believe that this was the woman on trial for one of Arizona's most brutal murders. "No jury is going to convict me because I'm innocent," she had told the press. "And you can mark my words on that one. No jury will convict me." She said it with absolute certainty, as if the verdict had already been decided in her favor. This is the story of Jodi Arias, a woman who believed she could manipulate everyone around her, talk her way out of murder, and escape justice. If you want more chilling true crime stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications to never miss a case that uncovers the darkest sides of human nature. A brutal discovery. June 9th, 2008, Mesa, Arizona. The desert sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the suburban streets in the quiet embrace of night. Neighbors were tucked into their homes, unaware of the storm that had struck one residence in their midst. Concerned friends of Travis Alexander, a 30-year-old motivational speaker and salesman, had not heard from him in 5 days. Anxiety gnawed at them. Something was wrong. Their footsteps quickened as they approached his home, the familiar driveway and garage suddenly ominous in the twilight. Inside, what they discovered would shock the nation. Travis lay in the master bathroom shower, his body a horrifying tableau of violence. He had been stabbed 27 times, his throat slashed from ear to ear, and a gunshot wound to the head completed the brutal scene. Each injury spoke to an intensity of rage, a personal vendetta, not a random act or a crime of opportunity. The combination of wounds left no room for doubt. This was deliberate, intimate, and carried out with ferocity. The bathroom, once a place of mundane routine, had become a chamber of unspeakable horror. The brutality of the attack sent shockwaves far beyond Mesa. Travis Alexander was not just a victim in a sensational story. He was a man whose life had touched many. Born in Riverside, California, Travis had grown up in a household marked by instability. Family life was chaotic, with frequent moves, emotional turbulence, and the challenges of navigating a fractured home. Yet despite the early hardship, Travis had cultivated a sense of resilience. Through faith, sheer determination, and an unyielding drive, he transformed himself into a figure of inspiration. By his late 20s, Travis had established himself as both a motivational speaker and a successful salesman. Friends and colleagues described him as charismatic, kind, and ambitious, a man capable of lifting those around him, encouraging them to overcome adversity and strive for excellence. He radiated confidence without arrogance, generosity without expectation, and ambition tempered by empathy. Those who knew him well would later describe the stark contrast between the life he led and the manner of his death, noting the cruel irony of a man dedicated to positivity being taken in such a violent, personal way. In the days leading up to his death, friends recalled, Travis had maintained his usual routines. He attended work events, spent time with family and friends, and continued building his personal and professional projects. Yet beneath the surface, there were tensions, particularly in his personal relationships, that would soon become central to the investigation. His interactions with certain individuals, both professional and romantic, revealed a complexity in his private life that would later be scrutinized in extraordinary detail. Law enforcement arrived swiftly, the Mesa Police Department securing the scene with meticulous care. Crime scene technicians photographed every angle, dusted for fingerprints, and began collecting evidence that would form the foundation of a case destined for national attention. Investigators noted the extreme nature of the wounds, the combination of stabbing, slashing, and shooting, and the symbolic intimacy of the act. Each detail, the position of the body, the blood spatter, the placement of objects in the bathroom was meticulously documented, with the understanding that these details would be crucial in unraveling motive, opportunity, and the identity of the perpetrator. As word spread through Mesa, the community was stunned. Neighbors, co-workers, and friends grappled with disbelief. How could someone so full of life, energy, and guidance meet such a violent end? The shock was compounded by the realization that this was not an accident or random act. The evidence suggested premeditation, personal grievance, and an intensity of emotion that pointed directly to someone who knew Travis intimately. Travis Alexander, a man who had built his life on resilience, inspiration, and compassion, had become the victim of a calculated act of rage. The tragedy left an indelible mark on the community, setting the stage for a case that would captivate the nation. unravel private conflicts, and expose the devastating consequences of betrayal, obsession, and violence. The beginning of an obsession. In September 2006, Travis Alexander's life took an unexpected turn at a prepaid legal services conference in Las Vegas. Among the crowd of professionals and eager salespeople, he met Jodi Arias, a 27-year-old photographer and aspiring saleswoman. The connection between them was immediate, magnetic, and intense. Travis, a devout Mormon devoted to his faith and its principles, found himself captivated by Jodi's charm, intelligence, and assertive personality. Jodi, in turn, was drawn to Travis's charisma, apparent moral grounding, and the life he had meticulously built. By February 2007, Jodi had converted to Mormonism and moved to Mesa, Arizona, taking deliberate steps to be closer to Travis. Friends would later describe her decision as emblematic of her determination and single-minded focus. What began as infatuation soon evolved into a volatile relationship. Travis, deeply committed to the principle of chastity before marriage, struggled with the pressures of their sexual involvement, creating a tension that would repeatedly test the limits of their connection. Despite these challenges, the pair remained emotionally entangled, even as signs of obsession began to emerge. Their relationship was marked by turbulence. By the summer of 2007, Travis and Jodi had officially broken up, yet contact between them persisted. Travis dated other women, seeking companionship outside the strained dynamic with Jodi, but Jodi's obsession only intensified. Friends and acquaintances reported increasingly alarming behaviors. She hacked into Travis's social media accounts, monitored his online activity, and engaged in acts of harassment. Tires were slashed, unexpected visits occurred, and her presence at his home became uninvited and unsettling. Travis himself confided to friends and family that he felt trapped between concern and fear, unsure of how to fully sever ties without provoking further instability. By April 2008, Jodi had returned to Eureka, California, seemingly distant but still enmeshed in Travis's life. Her obsession, however, had not waned. Travis's plans for a June 10th trip to Cancun with a new girlfriend became a flashpoint. Prosecutors later argued that Jodi's actions in the weeks leading up to the murders reflected careful planning and deliberate intent. She stole a .25 caliber handgun, rented a car far from her home to avoid detection, and borrowed gas cans. Each step appeared designed to allow her presence in Arizona without leaving a trace, a blueprint of premeditation that would later dominate courtroom proceedings. Friends of Travis observed the psychological tension building between them. He feared Jodi's persistence, worried about her increasingly invasive behavior, yet struggled with guilt, empathy, and the social awkwardness of setting firm boundaries. Jodi, meanwhile, meticulously mapped her movements, ensuring she could act without immediate discovery. The combination of obsession, planning, and calculated risk set the stage for a confrontation that would end in unimaginable violence. By June 2008, the relationship had reached a critical, explosive point. Travis's commitment to new relationships, his insistence on independence, and Jodi's unwillingness to relinquish control created a volatile mix. The emotional intensity of their history, past, love, betrayal, obsession, and resentment provided a context for the events that would unfold. What began as a chance meeting in Las Vegas had spiraled into a deadly intersection of passion and fixation, where personal grievances and psychological compulsions converged in lethal form. The evidence collected later by investigators painted a chilling portrait of forethought. Jodi's acquisition of a firearm, her strategic transportation arrangements, and her careful planning to avoid leaving evidence all suggested a level of premeditation that went far beyond a crime of passion. It demonstrated a methodical approach, one informed by emotional obsession and an intimate knowledge of her target. The tragic outcome on June 9, 2008, was not merely the result of a heated argument, it was the culmination of months of escalating tension, obsession, and meticulous, deliberate preparation. The day of the murder, June 4, 2008. Early morning, the streets of Mesa, Arizona, were quiet, the desert sun still low on the horizon. In the calm before the storm, Jodi Arias arrived at Travis Alexander's home. Her phone was off. Reports later indicated that her vehicle's license plates had been flipped, an attempt to conceal her presence. To neighbors, nothing seemed unusual, no warning of the horror that would unfold. Yet forensic evidence would later reveal a chilling prelude. Every move that day was calculated, methodical, and executed with a disturbing precision. Travis and Jodi spent the afternoon together, Their interactions later confirmed through photographs recovered from a camera found hidden in Travis's washing machine. The images, timestamps intact, captured the mundane and the intimate in a haunting sequence. At 5:22 p.m., they appeared in bed together, the photo portraying a normal, even tender, moment between two people. 7 minutes later, at 5:29 p.m., Travis is captured in the shower, water streaming down his body, a simple act of daily routine. Then, at 5 hours, 30 minutes and 29 seconds p.m., a final photo shows him alive, seemingly unaware of the impending danger. Seconds later, the camera fell, documenting only fragments of what would become one of the most infamous murder cases in recent American history. The violence erupted with a ferocity that forensic experts would later painstakingly reconstruct. Travis was stabbed first, each wound driven with force, reflecting both rage and determination. He fought back, struggling to escape the sudden onslaught, but the attack was relentless. In the hallways of his own home, he staggered, attempting to distance himself from his assailant, yet ultimately collapsed under the relentless barrage. Jodi's assault escalated. She slashed his throat with such intensity that forensic reports described the injury as near decapitation. The angle, depth, and force indicated both physical power and intent to kill, a precise, almost surgical execution of violence. Finally, a gunshot to the temple ended Travis's life definitively. In total, he suffered 29 stab wounds, a nearly severed throat, and a single fatal gunshot. The brutality was intimate, personal, and overwhelming, a crime that spoke to a mixture of obsession, rage, and meticulous planning. Once the act was complete, Jodi attempted to erase the evidence of her presence. She placed the camera that had recorded the day's events into the washing machine, likely hoping to destroy the final proof of the moments leading up to the attack. Blood, sweat, and adrenaline were left behind in the hallway and bathroom, but the camera and forensic evidence would ensure that the sequence of events could be reconstructed in excruciating detail. After the murder and attempted cleanup, Jodi fled to Utah. Law enforcement would later track her movements, piecing together her escape route, rental car records, and attempts to conceal her identity. Every step of the way, forensic science and investigative persistence provided a roadmap of premeditation. The crime was not a spontaneous act of passion or uncontrolled anger. It was executed with awareness, intent, and a calculated effort to cover tracks. Forensic experts later described the crime as a chilling combination of personal obsession and methodical violence. Travis, a man known for his charisma, motivation, and faith-driven life, had been confronted by someone he once trusted deeply. The juxtaposition of intimacy earlier that day, sex, shared time, and the semblance of normalcy against the violent end created a narrative of betrayal and calculated rage. Investigators would spend months reconstructing the attack, noting that the timeline, weapon choices, and post-murder actions all pointed to careful planning and a disturbing understanding of the consequences. The day that began like any other in Travis's life ended in blood and betrayal, leaving behind questions, grief, and a trail of evidence that would eventually expose the horrific truth. The camera in the washing machine, the sequence of photos, and the forensic reconstructions provided a window into the final moments of a man's life and the calculated nature of the woman who ended it. The web of lies. When law enforcement first confronted Jodi Arias about Travis Alexander's murder, her story was airtight, at least on the surface. She adamantly denied being in Mesa on June 4, 2008, claiming that she had spent the day with her boyfriend, Ryan Burns, in Utah. To investigators, her alibi seemed convenient, but the evidence told a different story. Forensic analysis quickly dismantled her narrative. Her palm print was found smeared in Travis's blood, an indelible mark placing her at the scene. Worse, photographs recovered from the camera in the washing machine showed Travis alive that afternoon, moments before the attack, and Jodi in the vicinity, directly contradicting her claim of being hundreds of miles away. The denial could not hold. 2 weeks later, Jodi altered her story entirely. Now, she alleged that intruders had broken into Travis's home, murdered him, and she had narrowly escaped. According to her account, 2 masked figures had carried out a brutal, premeditated attack, leaving Travis dead and her terrified. Yet the crime scene contradicted this narrative at every level. There were no signs of forced entry, no evidence of a struggle between intruders and Travis, and nothing stolen or tampered with. The meticulous arrangement of the scene, combined with the calculated placement of objects and the camera, suggested deliberate staging, not the chaos one would expect from an outside burglary or home invasion. Her account was increasingly implausible. and investigators noted the pattern of shifting stories as a classic tactic to evade responsibility. As years passed and the trial loomed, Jodi's defense team prepared a new strategy: self-defense. Suddenly, she admitted to killing Travis but painted herself as a terrified victim, claiming dissociation during the attack. She asserted that she had acted out of fear, compelled by a perceived threat and unable to control her actions. According to her testimony, Travis had been violent, aggressive, and threatening, leaving her with no choice but to defend herself. To an untrained observer, the account sounded dramatic and potentially believable, but forensic evidence painted a starkly different picture. Medical examiners and forensic experts meticulously reconstructed Travis's final moments, revealing inconsistencies that would haunt Jodi's defense. Defensive wounds on Travis's hands and arms showed he had attempted to fend off a single, known assailant, not a group of intruders. The fatal gunshot trajectory, combined with the placement and number of stab wounds, indicated an attack carried out with intimate knowledge of his routines and vulnerabilities. Each wound reflected deliberate force, angles consistent with control and intent rather than panic or fear-driven reflex. The almost decapitated slit to his throat, 29 stab wounds, and the close-range gunshot directly contradicted the narrative of a spontaneous, defensive act. Investigators also noted the sequence of events as captured by the camera, hidden in the washing machine by Jodi in an attempt to erase evidence. Photos documented her presence before the attack, intimate moments with Travis, and the rapid transition from normalcy to violence. Every frame, every timestamp, placed her at the scene and demonstrated premeditation. Her sudden self-defense claim ignored this timeline entirely, focusing instead on a constructed narrative that would appeal emotionally in court. As the trial approached, prosecutors emphasized the pattern of deception. Jodi's shifting accounts from denial to intruders to self-defense were not just attempts to confuse law enforcement. They were indicative of calculated manipulation, awareness of her culpability, and a repeated effort to rewrite the story to her advantage. The contrast between her testimony and the forensic reality would become central to the prosecution's case, highlighting not only the brutality of the murder but the deliberate efforts to cover it up and shape public perception. By the time the courtroom proceedings began, the pattern was clear. Jodi Arias had spent years constructing narratives that absolved her of responsibility. Each new story, each sudden revelation of fear or dissociation, collided with an unyielding body of forensic evidence. Blood spatter, camera timestamps, wound analysis, and physical traces left behind all pointed to one inescapable truth. The killing was intentional, meticulously executed, and Jodi's shifting accounts were attempts to obscure the reality of her actions. The trial. January 2nd, 2013. The Maricopa County Superior Court buzzed with anticipation. Reporters, legal teams, and spectators filled the benches. Cameras focused on the proceedings, and the air was thick with tension. Judge Stephen Z. presided over the case, his presence commanding order in a courtroom poised on the edge of national attention. This was not merely a local trial. It had become a spectacle, broadcast live to millions across the United States, captivating audiences with its mixture of brutality, obsession, and the complexities of human psychology. Prosecutor Juan Martinez faced Jodi Arias, whose defense team included the experienced attorneys Kirk Nurmi and Jennifer Wilmot. From the outset, Martinez laid out the state's case with methodical precision, presenting evidence piece by piece, each element reinforcing the central narrative: premeditated murder fueled by jealousy, obsession, and rage. He began with the stolen .25 caliber handgun, the rental car Jodi used to conceal her movements, and the borrowed gas cans, all orchestrated to enable her presence in Mesa without leaving a trace. He meticulously outlined the disabled phone, the flipped license plates, and the timeline of photographs recovered from the camera found in Travis Alexander's washing machine. Each detail was more damning than the last, painting a picture of a calculated, coldly executed plan. Martinez then turned to the gruesome details of the attack itself: the 29 stab wounds, the near decapitation of Travis's throat, and the fatal gunshot to the temple. Every element of the crime scene was presented with clarity, emphasizing the intimate knowledge Jodi had of Travis's routines and vulnerabilities. He highlighted the defensive wounds on Travis's hands and arms, evidence of his struggle against a single, determined assailant, not the intruders Jodi had claimed. The prosecution carefully walked the jury through each step of the evening, reconstructing the final moments with chilling precision. For 18 days, Jodi Arias took the stand, attempting to depict herself as a victim of fear, abuse, and dissociation. Her voice trembled at times, her eyes welling with tears as she recounted her version of events. She described a relationship gone wrong, claiming psychological torment at the hands of Travis. Yet the prosecution methodically dismantled her narrative. Every detail she offered was scrutinized, every claim of memory loss or confusion directly contrasted with forensic evidence, phone records, and photographic timelines. Her testimony, intended to evoke sympathy, instead highlighted contradictions and implausibilities. During cross-examination, Martinez was relentless. He confronted Jodi with her own words, her emails, voicemails, and text messages, exposing her repeated efforts to manipulate perception. He questioned her about the camera, which captured the day's events and the moments leading directly up to the murder. He asked about the staged phone calls to Travis's voicemail after his death, supposed attempts at communication that were, in reality, deliberate performances designed to mislead investigators. With each question, the inconsistencies in her story became impossible to ignore. Martinez's strategy was surgical. He moved beyond the emotional spectacle of Jodi's testimony and focused on facts, timestamps, forensic reports, rental agreements, and physical evidence. The jury was forced to confront a pattern of deception, premeditation, and meticulous planning. He highlighted the contrast between her carefully rehearsed narrative and the unyielding, irrefutable proof that Travis's death had been intentional. The courtroom itself became a stage of tension and drama. Spectators leaned forward, journalists scribbled notes and typed on laptops, and cameras captured every subtle expression. Jodi's shifting demeanor, confident one moment, tearful the next, was dissected under Martinez's questioning, revealing the contradictions that had become central to the prosecution's argument. Each lie, each attempt to manipulate emotion, was exposed systematically, leaving little room for doubt. By the end of the first week, it was clear that the trial was not merely about the murder of Travis Alexander. It was a battle over truth, perception, and accountability. The prosecution's meticulous presentation of evidence, coupled with the relentless dismantling of Jodi Arias' story, set the stage for a courtroom drama that would captivate the nation for months. The meticulous planning, the obsession, and the ultimate betrayal of trust all converged in this trial, leaving the jury, the media, and the public grappling with the depths of human obsession and the consequences of premeditated violence. A profile of deception. As the Jodi Arias trial unfolded in Maricopa County Superior Court, the focus shifted from physical evidence to psychological evaluation, a critical battleground in the defense's attempt to cast her actions as the result of trauma or dissociation. Enter Dr. Janine DeMarte, a forensic psychologist called by the prosecution to examine Arias's mental state. Her testimony would pierce the carefully constructed narrative of fear and victimhood that the defense had tried to present. Dr. DeMarte was clear and unflinching. Through months of interviews, standardized psychological testing, and behavioral analysis, she determined that Arias did not suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, nor did she exhibit dissociative amnesia, the fog the defense claimed had overtaken her during the murder. According to Dr. DeMarte, Jodi's apparent lapses in memory were not the result of trauma, but of deliberate deception. The behaviors she exhibited, shifting stories, inconsistent accounts, and feigned confusion, were calculated, designed to obscure responsibility rather than reflect a disordered mind grappling with real psychological trauma. Instead, Dr. DeMarte diagnosed Arias with borderline personality disorder, BPD. This disorder, she explained, manifests in unstable and intense interpersonal relationships, fear of abandonment, emotional volatility, and manipulative behavior. Individuals with BPD often oscillate between idealizing and devaluing others, forming attachments that can become obsessive or possessive. Her psychological profile, Dr. DeMarte testified, reveals a pattern of manipulation, deceit, and an extreme need for control over interpersonal dynamics. Her fog is not amnesia, it is lying. Defense witnesses had attempted to depict Travis Alexander as controlling and abusive, implying that Jodi's actions were defensive, even a response to sustained emotional and psychological torment. Friends and acquaintances took the stand to corroborate a narrative of intimidation, fear, and threat. Yet during cross-examination, Martinez and the prosecution relentlessly dismantled these claims. Witnesses struggled to provide verifiable evidence, often relying on hearsay, selective anecdotes, or emotionally charged interpretations. The jury was forced to confront the inconsistencies. No documented history of violence on Travis's part matched the allegations, and every attempt to paint Jodi as a victim was undermined by the lack of objective corroboration. Even beyond the courtroom, Arias' behavior painted a disturbing picture. In jail, isolated and under observation, her actions suggested a personality invested in performance and self-focus, rather than genuine fear or remorse. Interrogation room recordings and surveillance revealed her strikingly unusual conduct. She practiced headstands, sang aloud, and engaged in extended self-examination in mirrors. She posed for an audience that didn't exist, performing gestures and expressions designed to capture attention, even in total isolation. These behaviors were inconsistent with someone overwhelmed by trauma. They were theatrical, controlled, and deliberate. Psychologists emphasized that such conduct aligns with traits observed in borderline personality disorder, the need to manipulate perception, draw attention, and maintain dominance in social and interpersonal situations, even when alone. The prosecution presented Dr. DeMarte's analysis as evidence of intentionality and deceit. Arias's shifting stories, her staged remorse, and her dramatic courtroom performance were not indications of mental incapacity. They were part of a broader pattern of manipulation. The contrast with her defense's portrayal of fear and trauma was stark. Where the defense claimed dissociation, the prosecution pointed to meticulous planning. Where Arias's team suggested she had been a passive, overwhelmed young woman, evidence of her actions, premeditated travel, disabling her phone, acquiring weapons, cleaning evidence showed calculated, deliberate behavior.